The walk home had been a silent battle against his own thoughts. Tengen's mind raced with virtuous plans and schemes, but none seemed feasible enough to gather such a massive sum in a short time span. Upon entering, he was greeted by the familiar scent of jasmine. "Tengen-sama?" came the voice of Hinatsuru, and he just looked up to see her sitting at the coffee table. She donned a light purple robe, her eyes filled with a mix of relief and delight. "Welcome back." She smiled gently, though the expression didn't quite reach her eyes. It was clear she stayed awake all night waiting for him. Tengen closed the door behind him with a sigh, and his eyes dropping to the floor. "Hinatsuru," he began, his voice heavy with fatigue and emotional. "Don't tell me you stayed up all night waiting for me." Her smile remained as she nodded. "Of course I did. I was worried," she said, raising from her position on the tatami mat floor and approaching him. She could see the strain echoed throughout his features. The dark circles under his eyes, a stark contrast to his usual vibrant complexion. Where is Suma and Makio?" he asked upon glancing around the empty room. "They're both asleep," Hinatsuru replied, then told him the two tried to stay up with her but eventually succumbed to their exhaustion. She studied Tengen's expression carefully, noticing the gravity of his gaze. "Anyways, how was your night with Yin?" Tengen's eyes met hers, and he gave a small smile. "It was wonderful. She gave me these alcohol chocolates. Wouldn't you believe that?" he said with a light chuckle. Hinatsuru couldn't help but smile, happy to hear he had a great time despite the circumstances. "I'm glad to hear that," she says softly, reaching up to touch his cheek. But her touch lingers, and her eyes search for his for something more. She senses a shadow behind his smile, and Tengen's smile falters for a moment, and he sighs heavily. He knows he can't keep the truth from her. "It was more than I expected," he admits. What was?" she asked, her smile fading into concern as she sensed the tension in his voice. "She told me about her past, and I learned the only reason why she's working in the brothel to pay off an $8 million debt," Tengen said, his voice tight with emotions as he looked up at Hinatsuru. The smile on her face disappeared, replaced with shock. 8 million yen? Yeah, I was just as surprised." Tengen sighs, running a hand through his silver hair. "I tried to get her to commit a shinuke with me, but she refused," he added, the frustration in his voice adamant. "She didn't want to get in trouble." Hinatsu chuckled. "Well, she is a smart girl," she said, her gaze softening. "She knows that running away with you would only make things worse." "As if they could catch me," he boasted with a laugh, his confidence not quite making the underlying seriousness of the situation. "We'd be far away by the time they realize she's gone." Hinatsu shakes her head in his antics. "But that's not what she wants, is it?" Tengen's smile faded, and he nodded solemnly. "No, she wants to settle her debt so she can be debt-free," he said, his voice filled with respect for Yin's strength and integrity. "But I can't just leave her there, which is why I promised to pay her debts and make her my 4th wife." "To Tengen-sama, that's..." she stuttered, unsure of how to respond. "I know it's a lot to ask," Tengen interrupted her, his low voice and serious. "But I can't just ignore her plate, Hina. That's why I'm going to become an omonji at the Gurwan." Hinatsu's eyes widened in shock. "An omonji? Tengen-sama, are you sure? He nodded, the determination in his eyes unwavering. It's the only way to help her. Pay off her debts, that is, much faster, he exclaimed, his jaw set firmly. However, there's a problem. He paused, taking a deep breath as if bracing himself for her reaction. The transfer fee for her contract is $5 million, on top of the $8 million she owns. Hinatsu gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. That's 13 million yen, she echoed his earlier shock. You don't have that kind of money, do you? Tengen groans, dramatically slumping his head against his shoulder. No, I don't. But I have to find a way to get it, he says, his voice filled with steely resolve. That woman, Yatamoto, must take me for a fool. She's greedy, and I know she'll try and squeeze every penny out of me. Hinatsu wraps her arms around him comfortably. What are you going to do? I don't know. I haven't thought of anything yet, Tengen admitted, leaning into her embrace. But I'm not going to let that slave-driven win. He then slowly wrapped his arms around Hinatsu's waist, pulling her closer to his tall frame. Mark my words, Yinchan will be ours, he vowed, his arms tightening around her. I just need to think of something. Silence soon filled the room as Tengen tried to rack his brain for a solution. His heart was set on saving Yin, but the path ahead was fraught with challenges of uncertainty. What about taking on the community missions? Hinatsu suggested gently, stroking Tengen's back smoothly. Perhaps. Tengen's voice was a muttered, lost in thought. But what good does saving a cat from a tree or search for someone's missing dog do for 13 million yen? He said with a scoff. He knew he had to be crafty to come up with such a sum. The community's missions won't suffice. He needed something grand, something that would pay out enough to cover Yin's debt, then some. Maybe I could. His voice trailed off as such a thought struck him. Left with no other option, there's only one thing Tengen could think of. Hina? Yes, Tengen-sama? He took a deep breath. I'm going to do something stupid, he said. Huh? What do you mean? She sweated nervously, not understanding what it is he's planning on doing. Lifting his head from her shoulder, Tengen kisses her on the forehead before pulling away from her embrace. Without skipping a beat, he walks over to the sake set on a low wooden table in the corner of the room, pours himself a cup, his hand trembling slightly as he brings it to his lips, and down in one go. Ah, that hit the spot, he exclaimed, placing the cup back down with a thunk. Hinatsu watched as he then headed towards their shared room, her gaze trailing after him. What are you doing, Tengen-sama? She called out, a hint of worry in her voice. To change, he said with a sly smile. There's someone I need to talk to. Hinatsu was confused by Tengen's shift in mood. Talk to? Who? She wondered, defiantly wondering concern for her husband's well-being. She knew Tengen had a tendency to rush into things without thinking through them, especially when it came to his emotions were involved. But whatever he had planned, she could only hope it was something that wouldn't get him hurt, or even worse, killed. But knowing Tengen, it was bound to be something reckless yet surprisingly effective. Tengen stood atop the Udurishiki Manor in the early morning sun, casting a warm glow on his features. His heart was racing as he contemplated the task ahead. He knew that asking for Okiyama-sama's help was a sign of weakness,
but the stakes were too high to care about pride. This has got to be the stupidest thing he has ever done. But for Yin, he'd do it. After all, he was all out of options. Besides, Kayaka has been nothing but kind to him since he's joined the demon slaying course. Tengen refused to be like his nursing father and younger brother, who were pathetic to human life. Instead of following that path, he had chosen to become a demon slayer to protect and save people. After leaving his clan, Tengen and his wives had nowhere to go until they met Kayaka. Tengen still remembered how the man had welcomed them with open arms, even after finding out his bloody yet complex path. Kayaka never judged him. Instead, he saw the potential within him. Thus, Tengen owed him a debt of gratitude that was vast as the sea, and it couldn't be helped. He never let Okiyama-sama down. However, this was different. This wasn't about Tengen's pride or his desire to prove himself. It was about saving the woman he loved from a life of misery. Misery, God. Taking a deep breath, he jumped down from the rooftop and stuttered towards the manor's entrance. Meanwhile, Kayaka Udurashiki, the head of the demon-slaying course, was enjoying a moment peaceful with his wife, Ame, on the Egwa, the wooden verras surrounding the manor. The earthly scent of pine and onion grass filled the air, and the distant chirping of birds created a scene backdrop to the otherwise tense atmosphere. Kayaka felt so at peace. The herbal medicine Rengoku had brought him from his trip to Mount Yokiyama had worked wonders on his body. The inflammation in his joints had subsided, and for the first time in months, he felt like he had enjoyed the leisure stroll without pain. His blind eyes closed as he listened to the soft whispers of the breeze, a smile grazing his lips, but suddenly was interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching the garden path. Ami glanced up to see a tall figure walking towards them. She smiled upon recognizing it was Tengen. "Kayaka-sama, we have a visitor," she whispered, nudging her husband gently. Opening his eyes, Kayaka tilted his head. "Oh, who is it, my dear?" However, before she could reply, Tengen immediately brought a finger to his lips, silencing her. He didn't want to announce his presence just yet. Ami furrowed her brows, but her smile remained as she nodded her understanding. Tengen had always been a particular character, and his sudden stealthy behavior was not entirely surprising. Yet it was clear from the tension in his stance that something serious was afoot. "Ami?" Kayaka's voice was curious as he felt the air shift around him. "Who is it?" Tengen stepped onto the Egwa, and Ami couldn't help but chuckle. "It's a man. He's tall, and he's dressed like a shinobi," she described, the hint of her myth in her voice. "He has silver hair and bejeweled headband." Tengen pouted playfully at her. He knew she couldn't keep one secret, especially from Kayaka. "Aw, why are you giving me away, Lady Ami?" The white-haired woman only rolled her eyes. "Ah, Tengen!" Kayaka exclaimed, his face breaking into a bored smile. "What brings you here?" Tengen stepped closer, his expression mix of determination and anxiety. I've come to ask for a favor, Okiyama-sama," he said, kneeling on one knee. "Oh? What can I do for you?" Kayaka's voice was warm, but there was a hint of curiosity. As Tengen stared at the man, he felt his heart pound in his chest. He's never been one to ask for help, especially from someone who had given him so much already. Was he seriously going to ask this saint of a man for money? Tengen felt disgusted with that, but love had made him desperate. He had no choice, for again, he would swallow his pride. "Okiyama-sama," he began, his voice a whisper. "If it's not any trouble, could I borrow some money?" Tengen's eyes never left the floorboards, his cheek flustered with embarrassment. Silence filled the Egwa. The only sound, the rustling leaves in the breeze, gentle. Kayaka's expression remained unchanged, his blind eyes seemingly staring into the distance, but Tengen knew he was thinking, listening intently. "How much do you need?" Kayaka finally asked, his tone calm and measured. Tengen took a deep breath and confessed the sum he needed to secure Yen's freedom. 13 million yen, Ukiyatama-sama, he said, his voice barely above a murmur. Kayaka smiled and faltered. "My, that is quite the large amount, Tengen." He spoke. "What is it for?" Fuck! How is he going to explain without sounding insane? Just, what is he supposed to say? Despite the devil on his shoulder telling him to lie, Tengen knew he had to be honest. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, bracing the impact of his confusion. I've been stricken by love, Ukiyatama-sama." Kayaka's smile grew. "Love, you say? May I ask who the individual that has captured your heart so thoroughly?" "She's from Yoshiwara, and her name is Yen," Tengen confessed, his voice filled with sincerity. "I met her in Azuke, within the bustling Naosaki shopping street, and the reason I ask for such a large sum is because I wish to pay off her debts and take her as my fourth wife." Ami's gaze widened at this, whereas Kayaka's expression remained calm. Tengen could hear his heart racing. He knew the gravity of what he was asking for. He had been always self-reliant, never expecting nor needing help from others. But the love for Yin had changed everything. He felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment as an awkward silence followed his plea. He knew Kayaka was a man of honor and understanding, but asking for such a substantial amount of money was unpredictable. "I know it sounds ridiculous." Tengen's voice rushed out, trying to fill the silence. "But Yin is not like the others. She's kind, she's strong, she's..." His words stumbled over each other as he searched for the right ones to express his feelings. "Please, I just want to save her from the clutches of Yoshiwara." Tengen continued, his voice thick with emotion. "The debt she owes is immense, but I can pay it off. She'll be free." Gone was the flamboyant and self-assured sound pillar, replaced by a man on the edge of his nerves. His heart pounded in his chest as he awaited Kayaka's response. The silence felt as it stretched on the eternity. Each passing second, a testament to the weight of his words. But then, Kayaka spoke. His voice was calm as the morning air. "Tengen, your willing to help this girl is compatible. Commendable, even." He began. Tengen's eyes snapped to meet Kayaka's, his heart in his throat. "But if it is for love's sake, then I'll be happy to assist." Tengen's heart skipped a beat as he stared at Kayaka in disbelief. "Ukiyatama-sama," he braved out, his voice shaking with gratitude. This man, despite his illness, was so kind, so understanding, so generous. He was truly a saint.